I'm multi-streaming. I was trying to do it all through StreamYard, but I'm going separate. So hello to everyone on Facebook and YouTube. Welcome to my live stream today. I'm Rosalia Rivera, and we're talking about grooming. We're talking about, are you as a parent being groomed? Are you, not your child, but you as the parent being groomed? So really important to talk about this. Let me know if you can hear me on Instagram because I know I've had issues in the past and I was supposed to be using my mic. So I don't know if it's going live here. I'm going to go check for a second. So don't go anywhere. All right, I'm back. Hello, everyone. So I'm just going to make sure that I have my mic working on Instagram because it doesn't always work. So I'm going to turn this on. So welcome to those who are joining me over on YouTube and Facebook. Welcome, welcome. I'm Rosalia Rivera. I'm the founder of Consent Parenting. And today we're talking about, as a parent, are you being groomed? So if you're on Instagram, say hello. Let me know that you're here. If you're on Facebook or YouTube, say hi. I'm talking about this today because I have been reading a new book, which I want to recommend to you. And I really think it's such an important book. I just found out about it. It's called Duck, Duck, Groom. And it is about how to understand how offenders, how predators target not only kids, but their caregivers. So, a really important book that if you're interested in finding this book or learning more about it, if you're on Instagram, comment the word groom. And if you are on YouTube or Facebook, I'm going to encourage you to, let's see if I was able to put this information here. I'm going to put the link to that book over on Instagram as well. You can comment the word groom, and I will be able to send you that information for that book. So let's get into it and talk about what do you need to know as a parent to determine if you're being groomed. Because we tend to hear a lot about, for example, kids being groomed, right? Like you've probably heard of this. If, especially if you've been following me, you know that I talk about this quite often. Really about what is grooming, child grooming specifically, because most of the time parents think that abuse happens as a way by assault, right? That a child will automatically become uncomfortable, that they will automatically recognize when they are being groomed or that they're being abused. A lot of times, what happens, and the reason why offenders get away with this so much, is simply because they have been groomed before the abuse happened. The only time that this doesn't really happen is if it is by a peer and there isn't any grooming that has happened. It's usually what would be then considered assault. But if we're talking about an adult, usually there is some grooming that has happened before the actual abuse started. And the reason why offenders do this is because it increases the likelihood that a child will not report. So a lot of parents have this misconception that an offender will just automatically abuse the child, that they'll, immediately start with that. But it starts with a very specific process. And there's actually 6 stages of grooming. So I'm going to go over what those are today, and then I'm going to talk about some of the ways in which parents get groomed first, and then how that eventually becomes then the grooming of the child, which once you get to that point, you would likely start to see red flags if you understand about grooming, if you understand like what that entails and what that looks like. If you don't know about those different signs to look for, I want to encourage you to check out my masterclass called Grooming Prevention. It's a second version that I did last year. It's updated, and it really dives into like what are the signs to spot if your child is being groomed, and then what to do as an intervention. So if you want to learn more about that, just comment groom, or you can, if you're on Facebook or YouTube, you can see the link there for that. Again, a lot of this information is readily available. You can dive into it in that class, or you can check out this new book called Duck Duck Groom, which I started reading by Anna Sedona. And I've actually invited her onto my podcast. So we're going to be recording that podcast in a couple of weeks. Fantastic book because it talks about not only child grooming, but very importantly about the grooming of adults. And I think a lot of people don't realize that when offenders are grooming adults, they're grooming entire communities. They're grooming essentially that all of the adults, so that it seems less credible when a child finally does report. Then people would be like, I can't believe that that person is someone who's, an offender. Like, they just seem so nice. They're so generous. They were so great with kids. They are such an upstanding citizen in the community, right? Like, this would be a person that goes to church all the time, or who spends a lot of time, taking care of the elderly, or like what have you, right? Like, so they have taken the time to meticulously groom the adults in the community, because one, it makes it less credible when a child does come forward. It makes it hard for the adults to believe that this, has actually happened. And so we're talking about, when they're grooming communities, it makes it harder for people to believe the child. And one of the things that I think a lot of people don't realize, as an example, is that when offenders are looking to target kids, they're looking for kids that would be less credible to believe. So children who might be in trouble a lot, they're considered like troublemaker kids. They would maybe be children who might have lied about something before, and it was like sort of a public thing, right? Like, so if one child got in trouble for something, because they said one thing but it turned out that it wasn't true, then that makes that child less credible. That might be a child that gets targeted, right? So let's jump into it and talk about grooming, right? So as I mentioned, there are 6 stages to grooming that most parents don't know about, they're not aware of. When I talk about in my master class about the signs of grooming, like, you've jumped into the grooming process already, but there are things that happen before that, right? So Cloud Blush says, I just had that experience as an adult. A security guard harassed me, and everyone was like, whoa, but I thought he was one of the good ones. Exactly, right. You just they are going to be charming people, right? And this is one of the things that I think a lot of people misunderstand, is that they think that they will spot an offender because they're going to be creepy, or they're going to be sleazy, or there's some sort of threatening aspect to them. But it's actually quite the contrary. We're talking about people who go out of their way to appear, you know like they're compassionate and caring, and maybe they're even vulnerable, right? Like, they kind of present themselves as very harmless. So we want to be able to start detecting these things, right? So the first stage, first of all, is targeting a victim. So this is when offenders are looking for families that maybe have different needs, right? Whether it's financial need, or the child has an emotional need, or there is something that's missing that they feel that they can contribute, and that it would be easy for them to get into that space with that family or that community. So number one is targeting the victim. The second stage is then to gain trust and access. So this is where you're going to see that they get very charming, that they are very generous with their time. They are, someone who will see that, oh, that child isn't getting a lot of attention, so I'm going to be extra nice to them, or I'm going to, make them feel special. And the parents seem to, really want their child to succeed at this particular sport. So maybe that's a way that I can, make them feel special about their child. So again, notice how we're talking about they are really working at making the parent feel special about their child. Like, oh, your child, is amazing at piano, and that your child isn't really that into piano, but they've seen that they're really good at it, so maybe I should like encourage my child to practice more, right? So they're starting to like really help gain your trust in order for you to give access, right? Once they get access, then they begin to actually groom the child. So the parent is always going to be that firewall of protection. They're always going to be the ones that they have to get through that defense first in order to then begin to groom the child. They might start doing it simultaneously, especially if they have access to the child because they're in their classroom or they're in their soccer team. And so automatically they have that access, but now they're looking to get deeper access. So they're always going to do that. And then the third stage is actually filling the need. So unfortunately, a lot of offenders put themselves in positions of authority and positions of power where they have access to kids. So this is where they are seeing what's the need, right? Like, do these parents really want this child to succeed at this thing? And I have the ability to help them do that. So can I fill that need for that parent and tell them, I've been able to help other kids get to the finals or the champions, or I've been able to, help students, blah, 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 blah. I've been able to whatever it is. And so they are looking at how they can fill that need. And with the child, again, we're not focusing on child grooming today, we're focusing on parents. So they'll fill that need for the child, whatever that particular thing is. It might be very different from what the parents' needs are, right? The parent might have this specific need, but the child's need might be different. So they're looking at filling both of those needs, but again, starting with the parent, right? So it's important to be aware of these things. I'm just checking the comments here to see if there are anyone's. Lydia says hi. Hello, Lydia. Thanks for tuning in and for saying hello. And for all of you here, let me see on Instagram if there's any questions that are coming in or popping up. Okay, so Cloud Blush says, I appreciate your content so much. I recently realized that as an adult who worked at my high school was grooming me. I realized it early with my friends. Took longer to realize it regarding myself. Yeah, sometimes you don't realize that it's happening, right? Such an important live. Okay, thank you. Will it be saved? Yes, it is being saved on Facebook and YouTube. Won't be saved on Instagram, but it will be saved on YouTube, so you can find it there as well. Okay, so let's keep going. So we were talking about stage one. Of course, there are 6 total. So stage one is to target the victim, figuring out who is it that's going to be the easiest target. When you become a proactive, educated parent, you become less of a target. So hopefully, if you're doing this work, no one's going to even want to get to this stage. But a lot of times, offenders don't know because parents aren't always vocal. You may be doing this work, but you're not talking about it with the adults in your child's lives, right? So this is why I preach this day and night that we need to talk to the adults in our kids' lives, right? Okay, so that's number one. Number two was to gain trust and access. So they may already have access, but if they don't, they're going to work at gaining that access. So can I babysit? Can I, drive your child home? I would be happy to fill in when you are, you get called into work. Like this might be for someone who's a nurse or a doctor who has, is on call, and they might see, oh, this child needs supervision when you're not home. So I can, donate my time to that. Or, after practice, I'd be happy to drop off your child, like if you can't pick them up, right? So access. So they're gaining trust and access. And then it's filling a need. So this is again where we're talking about filling a need for a parent, not necessarily for a child. They're doing both things once they get that access, but they might be different things. Number 4 is isolation. So this is where they're trying to get that access so that they can continue to groom your child, have more of that one-on-one time. They are looking for that ability to be in private spaces, right? So they can't actively abuse a child in public. They can't do it while they're on the sports team. They are looking to do this in isolation. So trying really hard to gain that access. So if you start to notice that someone is saying to you, like, all of the things I just mentioned of how to get access, I would start to be a little bit more paying closer attention, right? So if you're noticing any of these things, one of the best things that you can do is start to, of course, talk to them about your practices, but also be paying closer attention to their behavior, to your child's behavior, to how many times they're asking for that one-on-one time, etc. Right? So this is where if you do have to allow that, and the person thinks that, oh, they went off to work, I'm going to go take care of this child. They might think you're coming back home at a certain time, but maybe you just tell them that that's the time that you're coming back, but you actually come back earlier. I talk about being an unpredictable parent. This is what I mean by that, is just show up early, unannounced, and see what's happening, right? See what's going on. Now, a lot of times people are like, well, if I know that someone's grooming my child, like, I'm not even going to let them be with my child alone. And that's great. If you feel like you have made that determination and you realize, like, this person is obviously, grooming my child, then you want to cut that off. If you feel sure about that, then by all means, cut off that one-on-one access, that isolation that they would have with your child. But a lot of times people don't know. They self-doubt, right? They might think, well, maybe I'm being paranoid. I've known them all my life, right? So we tend to think of it being someone outside of our home, but it could be someone who's in our family, right? So a lot of times we assume that it's just someone who we don't know, that we're meeting for the first time, but it could be a family member. It could be your child's cousin. It could, who's older. It could be an uncle, a grandparent. So we do want to be aware of the biases that we have about the people who are closest to us, who could potentially be grooming, right? So being an unpredictable parent for that reason can give you just another layer of just checking in and making sure, right? Okay, before I move on to the next one, I just want to see if there's any comments or questions. Feel free to chime in if you do have a question. I'm checking on both here on YouTube and Facebook, as well as Instagram. Okay, so let's keep going. I don't see any comments. We're talking next about stage number 5, which is then once they've gained trust, they've gained access, they have determined who is the best target for them to be able to get away with abuse, then they're going to start actually sexualizing the relationship. This is typically when you would not be able to see what's happening, because this is now happening in privacy. But there's a couple of clues that can happen before this, right? And some ways that you can start to see, is this becoming something where they're crossing my child's boundaries? Does my child feel like they are showing some kind of signs, whether that is facial cues when this person's near, or any body language that you can spot, because maybe now they've already started sexualizing that relationship. But a couple of clues, for example, before this happens, or at least where you can see it, is if they are doing things that are crossing body boundaries in front of you. And they aren't sexual, but they are definitely things that either make you uncomfortable or make your child uncomfortable. They're testing to see if you will say anything. So a lot of times it would be something like tickling. It would be something like maybe they are grabbing them and picking them up, and the child may seem uncomfortable, but the child's not saying anything because they haven't learned how to set those boundaries clearly yet. Or the child is actually okay with the tickling and the rough housing, and you're not, but they see that you're not saying anything, so they recognize that you as an adult have poor boundaries. So this is testing you as well, which is part of the grooming process. Will this parent say anything? Are they okay with me physically handling their child this way? If you don't say anything, then that increases the likelihood that they're going to continue proceeding with this kind of physical touch. Also, the fact that you're doing it in front of the child and the child's not saying anything, or sorry, that you're not saying anything in front of the child, it sends a signal to the child that you are okay with all of this physical interaction, right? You're okay with them tickling them, you're okay with them roughhousing. And if your child physically shows that they're uncomfortable, but you don't really say anything in the moment, that also reinforces to your child that you're okay with the way that they're touching. Your child might afterwards say, like, I really didn't like the way that they were tickling me, or I didn't like that they were doing that. But you didn't set that boundary in the moment. So when an offender sees that, they recognize that you have poor boundaries, right? And so they will take advantage of the fact that you didn't say anything, that they can then later say to the child, well, your parents didn't mind and your parents didn't say anything, right? So it's really important that we teach kids how to be vocal, but we also are vocal about their boundaries and that we advocate for them on their behalf, because they can manipulate that later, right? So that's number 5, sexualizing the relationship. And then number 6 is really maintaining the control. So this is the part of the grooming where they have sexualized the relationship, they have started abusing the child, and now they are doing everything that they can to make sure that the child doesn't feel empowered to say anything. So they might use guilt, fear, shame, even a sense of loyalty, right? Like, if they've done the grooming process effectively, then the child will actually feel complicit, or they will feel guilty to report, because they will, feel a loyalty to this person because maybe they gave them lots of gifts. They spent a lot of time with them. They may have helped them to, get to a certain position within their team or in school or in whatever activity that they, want to do. There was an article that came out not long ago where there was this equestrian sports writer who was in that position where this, groomer had essentially gotten her to this, all of these higher level competitions, and he was doing a really actually good job in training her, but of course this was part of his grooming process. And so this child felt like if and he had threatened her, I'm not going to keep working with you, and then you're not going to be able to continue competing, and all of these bad things are going to happen, right? So essentially just threatening the child, using that sense of fear, but then also that sense of loyalty, like, look at all the things I did for you, and now you're going to do this, or whatever other tactics that they can use to gain that and keep that control so that the child won't tell. So that's the final stage where they would then escalate the abuse, because they would know that at that point the child is not going to tell. And the parent is so groomed as well that they're not even looking for signs anymore. They are not even suspicious of anything. And they are maintaining control, and through lies and through all kinds of ways that they have managed to groom the parent. So um, what can you do, right? We now know what the different stages of grooming are. What do you now do? What are the things that you can actually do, first of all, to prevent it from happening? Let's start talking about that, because really that's where we want to be. We want to be in a stage where we are not even going to become targets, because offenders are not going to be able to even get through that first stage. And that's what I really wanted to talk about today. There's lots of information that I share in my child grooming prevention masterclass. which talks about what to do if you have spotted those grooming signs and what to do if you have spotted those. But what we're focusing on today in today's live is how to even prevent it from happening in the first place. Because a lot of times, what I tend to see is that parents, sorry, I'm moving down because I'm sitting on a couch on my leg and my leg's falling asleep. Um, what a lot of parents miss is the fact that adults get groomed first, right? And if they can get through that first part and get to your child, there's even less likelihood that you're going to notice the grooming that they are doing to your child because they've groomed you. Okay. So, first of all, what I always recommend is to talk to the adults in your child's lives who are spending a lot of time with your child, right? Because you want to make sure that they are aware of your education, the fact that you are being, that you're learning, that you're taking the time to learn about body safety, and that you're teaching your child body safety, right? So, part of what a lot of people have a hesitation of doing this is that they think that someone's going to think that you're paranoid. Why would you be teaching this? Like, do you think that there's a threat in your child's life, And so a lot of people are afraid to even have these conversations because they know that most people don't like to talk about this topic. They are afraid of it. They don't like to even hear about it. And so if you're talking about it, then you must be paranoid, right? And so there's this fear of talking about it. But if you do it in the right way or approach it in the right way, there's nothing, that there's no reason to fear this conversation. Okay, before we go on, Jennifer on Facebook says, is tickling roughhousing okay if the child seems to be having fun and I don't feel like it is crossing any boundaries? So, great question. And if you feel like there are no boundaries being crossed, if this is an adult who, when the child says stop, they immediately stop, or if you were to say, can you check in and make sure that they are having fun? Because I'm not totally sure. Maybe they, always like pay attention to facial cues. Like, you don't have to say it in that moment. You can say it after, but always in front of your child. Just want to make sure that, if Jane is not enjoying the tickling, and if she says to stop, that you definitely stop, because we've been teaching about that. It seemed like she was having fun, but if there's any point that she says stop, please make sure you stop, right? So talking about that openly is another signal, yeah, right? Doesn't mean that you think that she wasn't having fun and so you have to like step in, but just to be vocal about it and see how that adult responds. If the adult responds positively and they're fully on board and they love it and they want to hear more about what you're doing, then that's okay. But keep checking in with your child regardless, right? I think that it's really important to make sure that we're always having these conversations. Okay, so Basket Weave says, really appreciate this information. Unsafe adults can be so tricky. Yes, they can. And these are the kinds of things that we want to teach our kids about so that they in turn learn what grooming is as well. You want to help them be able to, spot grooming, but we want to start with ourselves, especially when our kids are really young, when our kids are 3, 4, 5 years old and they're just learning about this. We can't expect them to learn and have all that information and put it into practice. We have to be the ones. But as our kids get older, we want to teach them about the concept of tricky people and what grooming is and how to spot those signs. Okay. Queen Grateful Heart says, it's the same concept as us teaching what to do if there's a fire. Yes, we want to make sure, right, that we are helping our kids stay safe. This is just one other part. Grateful Heart says, will this recording be saved? I came in late. Yes, it will be. You can definitely watch it on YouTube or Facebook, where the recording will be. It won't be up on Instagram, but it will be on YouTube and Facebook. Okay, so let's continue with talking about how to prevent the grooming from happening in the first place. So we want to make sure that we are talking to the adults in our kids' lives. And here's a very quick script on how to do that, right? We tend to be afraid of these conversations. So the best way to do this, and especially as your kids are going to be starting school, if they have a teacher that's new or a new coach for a sports team, or a new neighbor has moved into the neighborhood that has kids, and they want to, the kids have gotten along and now they want to spend time at their house because they have all the like fun stuff, or whatever the situation is with this new person. But even with family members and adults that we've known our whole lives, we want to have these very simple conversations that go like this. I just started taking this class on body safety, and I'm learning so many crazy things I had no idea about before. And did you know? And then you can share some facts, right? 1 in 4 girls, 1 in 6 boys are abused before they're 18. I had no idea that the numbers were so high. And I know a lot of people tend to think that it doesn't happen in their backyard, but based on the statistics and based on the numbers, it's blah, 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 right? So you want to share some information, share some awareness, create some educational spaces to talk about this, and then say, and since my child is this age, I want to make sure that I'm doing what I can to reduce the risks. So here's what we've started to do. And now, depending on who it is that you're talking to, you want to give them some ideas about how they can be part of that prevention practice, right? How they can be part of what you're doing to increase their safety and to reduce risk, right? So, this would be where you say things like, we're teaching them that we don't keep secrets in our house, and we're letting them know that they can say no to hugs or kisses, that their body belongs to them, that et cetera, depending on your child's age and what you're actually teaching them. So these are good opportunities to say, what do you think about that? Or, we'd love for you to be part of our safety team and be able to support what we're doing at home. So these would be really good opportunities to talk about the different practices that you have, what you're doing at home, and ultimately to engage them in that conversation to see what they think. Because most of the time, when you talk to an adult who could be a potential offender, right, who could be looking to target your family, now you have basically said to them, we are not an easy target. I'm educating myself, I'm teaching my child, and I'm vigilant, right? So this is the messaging that we want to convey, because that offender is going to go, great. This is not an easy target. This is not a home where I'm going to easily get away with things because this parent is on top of it. So it will dramatically reduce the risk of your family even being targeted in the first place. But you have to be willing to have these conversations openly in front of your child. You can have some of those conversations and say, we're teaching them that they can say no. We're teaching them that their body belongs to them. We're teaching them that, we don't keep secrets in our home. Like, you can say those things in front of your child, because this is what you want to be open and transparent about, right? So that's one of the first steps that you can take in order to reduce the likelihood of stage 1 even happening, which is that an offender is looking for the perfect target. Okay, the second thing that you can do to reduce the risk of even being targeted, or even if you have become a target, and I will say, I talk about this more in depth in my grooming masterclass, is who is going to more likely be targeted. Unfortunately, adults that are likely going to be targeted on higher levels are single parent homes. So if you're co-parenting, if there's another parent that's not in the home, that increases the risk of you being targeted. I hate to say that, but unfortunately, that's a big part of the truth of who offenders do target, because that parent is going to have a lot more needs in terms of childcare, financial needs, time with the child. Like, all of these things get increased, unfortunately. But the good news is that if you become a parent who starts regularly talking about this with other adults who are caregiving or spending a lot of time with your child, it's going to reduce the risk. So, the second thing you can do is start to get to know that person, right? If it's kind of inevitable that this person spends a lot of time with you, with your child, as an example, a teacher, get to know them, right? Get to ask, like, start asking them more questions about them. So, what school did you work at previously? Do you do any other extracurricular things with kids? Um, you know, Tell me more about, your education. Where did you go to school? Like, whatever questions you can come up to think about that are sort of normal conversation, but also give you some insight into this person. If you notice that they are like volunteering at every kids activity that they can think of, that might be a bit of a yellow flag to look into. If also there's something in your gut that is telling you like some of this sounds like BS, listen to your gut. Your gut is always trying to tell you to pay attention to something. So that is the number two, is to get to know them better, right? Determine, like, do they have a lot of friends? Are they married? Do they have kids? Not that that doesn't mean that they're not an offender. I just want to clarify that just because someone has children and is married does not mean that they're an offender. I think a lot of people have this misunderstanding that offenders who are pedophiles are single, they live alone, or they don't, have any romantic interest. That's not true, because not all offenders are pedophiles. So let's just make sure we understand that clearly. But asking those questions gives you more information about them. So make sure that you're like paying attention to what they're saying, what their answers are to your questions. Okay. All right. We're almost out of time because I was trying to keep this at 30 minutes. But again, those are the two main things: asking questions, getting to know them, and talking about what you are doing in your home. Those three things are going to give you a lot of information about them, and it's also going to give them information about you. You want to get to know them, you want them to get to know more about you and the things that you're doing to keep your child safe, to let them know that body safety and abuse prevention are at the top in your home, right? So these are two things that you can immediately do that will likely reduce the risk of an offender even targeting you. Or if you start to see that they're trying to groom you or your family, or they've groomed the community, and there's something in you that's like, this doesn't add up, then these are actions that you can take to learn more. And some of these things you might even want to do in front of other people, like when you're asking those questions, right? And you're asking them like, where did you work? And what other, like, activities do you do with kids? Or I've noticed that you are on, like, you're the coach for like two different teams. That must be a lot. Like, so, how come you are doing those kind, like, just kind of getting a little bit more information about them every time that you connect with them. Show up to events. That's another one. If you are, putting your child in a sports and they notice that you're not around, that is going to be a sign to them that that child has some gaps of vulnerability, right? Because the parent isn't always showing up. So if you can tag team with another parent or with another caregiver, whether it's a grandparent or a babysitter who's really, on top of it and attentive, you can send them on your behalf to pick up the child, to be the one who is attending those sports events or that competition or whatever it is, right? To let that person know that this child has someone always in their corner. There's someone who's always paying attention, and they're not a child that's going to be easily groomed, right? So being present is another way to reduce the risk. And that's not always possible because we have work or we have other responsibilities that we have to attend to. But if you can send someone else on your behalf that has, shown to be a trusted person, you don't want to just like assign somebody who you don't always even fully know. So we want to also make sure that we're doing it with someone that we trust, with someone who has shown to be a safe person. That can give you also and your child another layer of protection. All right. Okay, so that's what I have for you today. I hope that that has helped. If it has, please let me know in the comments and share this with others. Let other parents know, because the more that we can be that, person to protect our kids, to show up for them, to talk to other people about what we're doing, the less likely that our kids are going to be targeted in the first place, groomed, and then abused, right? If you feel like you already are in this stage where you have someone who is potentially grooming your child and you're seeing some signs that make you feel like you're uncomfortable with something, but you're not sure, check out my masterclass. It's called Grooming Prevention Masterclass 2.0. You can type in the word groom on Instagram, and that will send you information about that, as well as the book Duck, Duck, Groom by Anna Sedona, who is going to be a guest on my podcast in a couple of weeks. I will be talking about her in that book. It's a really great book also that I recommend. So if you don't want to sign up for the masterclass, it's only $5 or more to join. You can pay what you want for that masterclass. But if you want to get the book instead, I also highly recommend that. If you type in Groom on Instagram, you'll get both links. If you're here on YouTube or Facebook, the link is there, and I will post the link to the Duck Duck Groom book as well. All right, I hope that's helped, and I appreciate all of you being here today. Thank you for joining me. If you have other questions or are looking for a one-on-one consultation, DM me over on Instagram or shoot me an email, rosalia@consentparenting.com, and I'll get you a link to book that. Thanks so much for joining, everyone. Have a great week and a safe week and a back to school week next week. I hope all of you stay safe. Much love to everyone. Bye-bye.